Now, keeping in mind that I said previously that you had very, very different wings of both the Republican and the Democratic parties at this point in time, and that could easily still be true today. You're looking right now, in the past here, at some serious progressive wings within both parties and some serious conservative wings within both parties. And the result is that the Republican Party is going to split. Now, the problem with this is the fact that you're going into an election in 1912. And with one of the two parties split, that is going to open the door to any number of possibilities. In fact, we're going to see in the 1912 election that you actually have four major candidates running for office. Right now, it's 2020, and we have two major party candidates running for the presidency. Back then, you had four. So people's loyalties, people's choices, uh, just basically their thoughts on how they wanted government to run were not being pulled in two separate directions, but were instead being pulled in four separate directions. And when you have a multiplicity of individuals running in this way, really anything can happen. The Constitution is even set up in the event that nobody gets a majority in the Electoral College, that it'll go to the House of Representatives. Now, we haven't had that happen since 1877, but there was a possibility of that at this point in time with the upcoming 1912 election. And the problem for the Republicans was at that point in time, their party had split. So it's important to remember, ladies and gentlemen, that as I said previously, you had different wings within the party. And the two are going to mix about as well as oil and water. So there are issues within the party itself. And this is going to be true of any political party at any time in American history. You are almost never going to find any political party that is in perfect lockstep with one another, unless that party is incredibly small. Because you have to take into account that any and all political parties within this nation are made up of human beings. And each person has their own particular view on how things should happen, how things should go, what should be done, how it should be done, etc., etc., etc. And politicians are no different, ladies and gentlemen. They are the same way. And so within the Republican Party, which is what we're talking about here, just like, you could argue the same thing with the Democrats at the time, there were two wings. You had the progressives and you had the conservatives. Okay? And again, I said it a few moments ago. These two groups are going to mix about as well as oil and water. They are not going to get along. They are not going to see eye to eye. They are never going to agree on practically anything because they have two different visions of how to get where they are going. But what really split the party was the Speaker of the House, a guy by the name of Joseph Cannon. Now, Joseph Cannon ruled the House of Representatives as Speaker with an iron fist. This was a guy who was in charge. He wasn't going to allow any dissent. He was the boss, and he wanted to make sure everybody knew it. What he wanted was what was going to happen, period. Now, the thing is, this did not sit well, especially with the more progressive elements of the Republican Party. And so they were essentially known as the insurgents at the time, and Taft had kind of offered them his support. Now, the problem was that Joseph Cannon basically, he'd gotten to the position he was in by, succeeding at various things. So he wasn't just going to sit back. He let the president know that all of his plans in regards to the tariff would be held hostage. The speaker at the time did have the ability to essentially choose what legislation did and did not come up for a vote. As a result, Taft had to back down, and this really injured him. So now you can see that essentially you have the two wings now in open conflict with one another. The insurgents do not want to vote for Cannon to get him reelected as Speaker of the House, but he's going to get that job anyway. He is going to maintain his control of the House of Representatives. And this is one of the big things that splits the Republican Party at this time. In fact, by 1910, the Democrats are going to be in charge of the House of Representatives. They are going to have the House and you're going to see things start to change. Because 1910 is what's known as an off-year election. In other words, you have the Congress is up for re-election, but the president is not. But the thing is, 2 years later in 1912, as I mentioned, you're going to have 4 different candidates running for office. And into this, we get what has lovingly been referred to as the Bull Moose Party. 1912. Teddy Roosevelt feels that Taft has betrayed all of the various things that he wanted to accomplish, and as such, he's going to run for a 3rd term. Now, this is unprecedented, ladies and gentlemen. U.S. Grant had kind of toyed with the idea, but for a president to go for a 3rd term was unheard of. George Washington stepped down voluntarily. There was no rule against it, and there still was not here in 1912. But it just was something that wasn't done. And so he chooses to run for a 3rd term. Now, he does want to get the nomination of the Republican Party. And he comes pretty close. He's only 100 votes off from getting the nomination, but it might as well have been 1 million because he didn't control the procedures. Okay, he was not in charge of the convention. And so as a result, Taft gets nominated to run for re-election, and members of the Republican Party decide to bolt. The Teddy Roosevelt supporters within the Republican parties are now going to go out and form what's known as the Progressive Party. Now, it's called the Progressive Party, and that was the official name, but it's not what it's really come down through history to be referred to. When asked about whether or not, he felt that he could do a 3rd term, Teddy Roosevelt argued that he felt as strong as a bull moose. And there you go. That gave the party its name. Teddy Roosevelt, in showing how tough he actually was, during the campaign, as he's going to give a speech, is shot by a would-be assassin. And he still goes on and gives the speech anyway. Teddy Roosevelt is an individual that really knew what he wanted and was going to try very hard to succeed at it. The Bull Moose Party is going to have a pretty good run right here, but you're going to find out oftentimes with a 3rd party, all it really does is split whatever party they came from. And in this case, the Bull Moose Party is not going to succeed. They are not going to win, but they're also going to make sure that William Howard Taft does not get reelected.